Hey guys, my name is Loco Doco, the better looking host of Listen Loco, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Susan Little Susie Kim is a multi-talented esports personality. She has worked as a translator, commentator, and interviewer in a number of different esports titles, as well as roles at OGN on GameNet, the most legendary Korean broadcasting studio, and as a general manager in the Overwatch League with the London Spitfire. Today is her birthday, so let me introduce you to an OG of the esports industry. Her career began after she graduated in 2004 and moved at the behest of her parents to South Korea to teach English because she had a degree in English literature, and her parents told her, go back, learn your culture, reconnect with your grandma, etc. She was living on her own there though, and so she even says that she became a fan of Starcraft Brood War. Everyone was back then. It was just a thing when you were a teenager or an adult who was on the younger side. And she says that watching OGN and MBC, which is the one who did the MSL, OGN was the OSL, was basically her only friends while she was lonely living on her own in Cheongju. Now, interestingly enough, the player she was a massive fan of was the Protoss wizard himself, Kang Min, aka Nalra, who you might remember was a famous foil of Savior back in the day. What happened was she went to BlizzCon in 2005 and she actually got to meet Nalra. The following year in 2006, she would move back to the USA and she couldn't watch games because she'd gone to graduate school. She was just playing World of Warcraft on the side. In 2007, she attended BlizzCon. It reignited her love of esports. She actually got to meet Nalra again. There's kind of a cool story. I'll link the description box below. Team Liquid post about it, where after meeting Nalra, he asked for her number. She had dinner with him and he calls her at something mental, like 5 a.m, and he basically says, like, can you come to my room? So obviously she's thinking, like, this is a bit sus. But it actually turned out to be a totally genuine reason, which was he was locked out of his room and he couldn't think of anyone else to call. In doing so, though, in helping him, she then got to spend more time with Nalra. This is how she actually got to meet Tasteless, who went on to be the main English language commentator for Brood War, mainly obviously on GOM TV. At the time, he'd been a pro player himself, or at least at the level where you can try and qualify to tournaments like World Cyber Games. When she met Tasteless, she then in his room met a bunch of Team Liquid people, found out about the forum, logged onto it. So in 2007, she becomes a fan on Team Liquid. She goes back to Korea the same year to escape some difficult circumstances in her own life, got a gig pretty much immediately, doing translating for the World Cyber Games. If people don't know, that was originally set up by Samsung. It was a Korean project. In 2007, it was the one that in Brood War was won by Stork, if you remember, the Protoss player. And this took place in Seattle in the USA. In 2008, most famously, she was working for GOM TV with Tasteless. She would do interviews with the pro players. She interviewed many famous players, Flash, Jaedong, Bisu, even people like Tosh, etc. She even, in season 2, actually got to cast with Tasteless. Now, she says she was pretty bad, but back then, a lot of casting was pretty simple. Tasteless was obviously a massive nerd. Actually, I thought she knew the game fairly well for someone who was coming in as a casual and hadn't actually done casting. Then the problem was she lost her passion because Brood War started to die out. She went to England to complete her master's degree in linguistics and English language teaching. Teaching English would become a major focal point, not only of the through line of her career, but obviously what she's been able to do with her skill set in esports. That's why, actually, if you don't know her, she hates it when you write less in scenarios where you should write fewer, so learn that particular rule, or she'll have to write it up on the blackboard. Then she came back to esports around 2013 for Season 3 Worlds, the one that famously was the first one won by a Korean team. It was obviously won by SK Telecom T1 with Faker. Around 2014, she was working in League of Legends in Korea and Starcraft 2, which was still a massive game at the time. She worked with the ill-fated, it was something of a scam, ESGN TV as a news correspondent for South Korean esports. She went to events like IPL 3, IPL 4, IPL 5 as a translator for the Koreans. By the way, whenever she would go to events with Koreans, she would sort of act like a team mom for them to some degree. Doesn't surprise me she became a general manager in the Overwatch League. Then when she was back in Korea, she would actually help foreigners come and get set up and sometimes get merch like jackets from the teams and arrange meetups to go to some of the events, etc., and help teams come to boot camp and figure out what to do, etc. As she was working for ESGN TV, she was also covering many different games. She was doing StarCraft and Dota 2 and League of Legends and Sudden Attack, which is a bigger game over there. World of Tanks, which is obviously a big game in Eastern Europe and had been kind of white-labelled by a bunch of companies. FIFA Online 3. She did a whole gamut of different events in StarCraft 2. You can go and look some of those up on the StarCraft 2 Wikipedia. She did stuff like WCS Europe in Germany. She did Riot All-Stars in League of Legends in France. She did DreamHack Open Summer in 2014 in Sweden. She went to China for IEM Shenzhen. She was in South Korea in Season 4 for the League of Legends World Championship interviewing for OGN. She was at IEM Taipei in 2015 as a translator and interviewer. She did the IEM World Championship in Katowice, Poland in 2015, the one famously won by TSM in League of Legends, if people remember. She did the first Midsummer Invitational, which was in 2015, the one that was won by EDG over T1 for CBSI. She was at PAX as a player manager and translator. She was at the League of Legends World Championship during the stops in Germany and Europe so that she could interview people for Twitch. She worked at IEM Taipei in Season 10, which is in 2016 as a translator. And she was also at the IEM World Championship again in Poland in March in 2016. In League of Legends, in 2014, she was part of the OGN Global Marketing Department, helping foreigners and other people get interested in the stream and support people like Monty and Dor. More about Monty later. She did those Worlds 2014, 2015, depending on who you're talking to, OGN and Twitch, for interviews. I actually did one with her at Season 5 Worlds, where, by the way, I predicted that Coup Tigers would beat Katie Rolster. So what do you know about Dem Apples? The Shy over Sunday, basically. Also, she's helped me with my interviews at the time. I went around 2014 and I was able to get into some of the team houses thanks to her, and she knew people like CJ Entus and Najin. We did interviews where she translated for me with people like Matter, Dandy, Flame, Watch, Madlife, Shy. If you've ever seen my really good first Flame reflections, she was integral to getting that done, actually, and helping him speak as much as he could and giving me as much time as I could. She worked with people like ESL for games like World of Tanks and Point Blank for OGN. Don't expect everyone in all these games, but I'm just showing you she's a multi-talent and she's gone wherever it was necessary. Her interviewing style is one that you'll have seen mimicked by a lot of people, including some famous people today, whether they credit her or not. Because what she would do is not just interview people about the game, which she did know some things about, but she would try to get this Korean, who at the time there was a famous meme, the faceless Korean, where they have no emotion and personality. She would try, because she could talk to them in Korean and new Korean culture, to break through that sort of icy exterior where they were very stoic, and she would get them to connect with Western fans and tell them about memes and nicknames and funny things that Western fans thought. Like, for example, that Watch was like beloved by all the fangirls in the West, or someone like Bisu. Everyone thought he was so beautiful, even though he was so skilled at the game. She would also try and get them to speak some words of English so they could kind of show off that aspect. And when you listen to her questions and you listen to what she was explaining that the player was saying, she clearly knew the game. She was a fan of StarCraft Brood War. She'd grown up around esports. When Monty moved back to the US and went to LA to obviously work as one of the main commentators on the Overwatch League, she moved back with him. At this point in time, they'd already begun dating and were going to become married soon. She became the general manager of the London Spitfire, which, despite the name, was actually an all-Korean team. And this team was actually very, very good. They were the Season 1 champions. They were the team that had Profit, if you remember, the legendary DPS player. She's a very cultured individual because she's lived in the United States of America. She's lived in South Korea. She's lived in the United Kingdom. She always kind of described herself, as I mentioned before, as like the esports mom to the players. I'll give you an interesting personal anecdote. When I was going through one of the toughest times in my career, when, let's just say, I attended an event in Katowice, Poland called EMS1 Katowice, if you know that in Counter-Strike, and obviously there was the League of Legends tournament going on there too. This was a time period where I was just locked away in a hotel room with everyone on the internet messaging me hate messages, saying terrible things, including about how they'd kill and do other things to me. And this was one of the few people in esports that reached out to me, not even just to be like, oh, you know, what's going on, or like, are you okay? But to actually like sort of connect with you, make sure I was okay. And I can tell you, in that very dark time, one of the only people that actually made me smile. So I've actually always had a lot of affection for this individual. Also someone where later on, when I would then live in Korea and I would sometimes fly back to events, like I once went to a DreamHack Summer, I think it was DreamHack Summer 2014. We actually shared seats on a plane. It's one of the few times I've ever talked to someone for about 9 hours on a flight instead of, you know, talking to them for an hour and then going like, I'm going to read a book or watch a movie. Because she's just a very interesting individual. She's telling me all her life story, what she'd done, where she'd lived, what she'd done, why she was in esports, asking me all sorts of questions. Just someone who's a very social individual who understands the human connection, which often was missing in esports. I'd say it still is, but especially in the 2000s and the 2010s. She's someone as well who has been willing at times to take bold stances. Like, I'll just put it this way. She stood in favour of people like the Korean broadcast being able to set their cultural tone themselves and not have to sort of piggyback on, let's say, certain American cultural norms, which, by the way, that wasn't a very popular opinion, I can tell you, on lunatic sites like Reddit, you can imagine. She's someone who even would often speculate things like maybe the reason why men have outperformed women in esports is because they tend, as an average, to go more all in on their hobbies, or a bit more obsessive, whereas maybe women just play for fun or play a little bit, and there's just not as many that want to be absolute lunatics and dedicate their whole life to an esports game. She's even someone back in the day, because she grew up with the guys, where she would even joke in interviews about having a very nice pair of personalities. It actually feels almost borderline wrong to even mention that now that she's actually a mother. But then again, to be fair, that's literally what they're for. Now, as I mentioned before, she is married to Monte Cristo. They actually have 2 children, 2 boys. I've said this many times. The biggest giveaway that the woke people in esports don't know or care about the history of esports is they will put a whole bunch of women into Hall of Fames, give them Lifetime Achievement Awards, who are Johnny-come-latelys, who've done things in the last few years or did like one big thing like 7 years ago. This is an individual who's been here since 2007, who's been on camera since 2008 in terms of like working as a caster and an interview. So this is someone who should be a lock to be in a Hall of Fame if you want to put a woman in. By the way, forget even just putting a woman in. If you just want to put the OGs who built esports in, this is one of the people. This is someone else who could say, I am esports, because how could you deny it? If you don't think she's esports, you don't know esports. I did previously a Reflections with her back in 2014 where she tells a lot of this backstory. There was also an appearance she made on Summoning Insight 57 back when no one knew she was dating Monte Cristo, or some people didn't, which is why when I made sort of some bawdy jokes, because I actually knew her in real life, everyone's getting all offended, like, oh my God, how's she going to say all that stuff? She's not someone who's ever bothered by that. She's just a chill individual who's just cool and understands people for who they are and doesn't prejudge them in that way. By the way, if you want to actually read more about the story I've just described, including quotes from at the time some big scene figures, I would check out, I'll put in the description box below, an ESPN.com story written by Grace Han. I believe she works for Riot now. It's actually pretty good. It's kind of a good profile of who Little Susie is. So happy birthday to Little Susie, a true OG of the esports industry, someone I consider a friend. I would die for this kind of a person. And also, great wife to my friend Monte Cristo. In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Scrilluminati, my Patreon community, riding with me, and it is thanks to the support of the following people, this video and all of them on my channel are made possible. Matt, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Goh, Animosity, Thorin, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those dinner discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scrilluminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.